Yes, I'm speaking specifically to the individuals that are under the age of 18 and still in high school and thinking about your next step.
Mhm.
I know you want to get away from home, you want to experience the campus life. Maybe you got a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you want to be able to have your alone time with that individual. Just go get a hotel and stay at home, go
Mhm.
to the community college, knock out those prereqs.
Welcome to Becoming an Attending, a guide for future ER physicians. Each episode delivers financial insights into navigating undergrad, medical school, residency, fellowship, and becoming an attending physician. Your host, behavioral financial advisor Yohance, is here to ensure you're surviving and thriving through your transitions. Now, let's get started.
So welcome back. So this season, I have a very special treat for you. And I mentioned this towards the end of last season that we are focusing on this season, interviewing individuals in the medical field to just talk about their journey, to learn more about how they went from, elementary school, high school, college, choosing what they're going to do in their career in the medical field. And I really want to focus on the in between. What was happening those times where you were transitioning from college to medical school or nursing school, from medical school to residency, or from nursing school into actually working full time? I want to talk about that transition because that's where most people have the greatest amount of questions, concerns, and fears when it comes to their finances. So we wanted to be able to hear from some of our heroes. Yes, we're still calling them heroes. Yes, some of our heroes in the industry. We're not going to bang any pots and pans, though. We're not doing that here. But I want to take the time, like I said, to interview some folks to give you some insight. Now, if you're listening, you're like, well, I'm not in the medical community. Here's the thing. There's still going to be similarities. We're still going to have our trials and tribulations. And guess what? It doesn't matter what you do for a career. Dollars, a dollar, a dollar, a dollar. You're still trading your time. You're trading your energy for some money. It's just a different line of profession. So I want my medical students to listen to this, the college students to listen to this, so that you can pick up some of those tips and tricks because you don't have to learn everything by doing it. I know that's what they teach you in school. You got to practice. You got to cut this body open and all that fun stuff. Yeah, that's true when it comes to the medical stuff. When it comes to finances, you can just learn from other people. You don't have to make those mistakes. So without any further ado, I want to introduce our second guest of the medical community. We have Miss Zena Robinson. She is an RN hailing from the great state of California, and she is also the founder of Swallow the Pill,
Mhm.
which we're going to talk about that as long as it's not a jagged little pill. Name that artist in the comments later. So Zena, welcome to the Money Script Podcast.
Hello.
So let's just start with how you got to where you are today. So I want you to go back to what made you decide that you wanted to not just necessarily be an RN, but what made you decide that you wanted to go into the the area of medicine? What attracted you to that? When did you make that decision?
I think I made that decision in high school. I'm from South Carolina. I'm not from California. I went to a very, very small school in South Carolina. It was 250 students in the entire school, so everyone knew
Oh,
everyone.
that is small.
Very small.
It's like that was like my PE class. Dang.
Our senior year, they had this program called School to Work. And it's where you have finished most of your credits and you were near graduation, so you didn't need to be at school all the time. We were on the AB schedule. So one day I would go to school and the other day I would do work. It was a work program and I worked at Savannah Riverside. Some people know what that is. Some people might not. It's a government facility, but it was office based. So I was sitting in a cubicle for 8 hours every other day while I was in my senior year of high school. And I hated it. I
Oh,
figured out quickly then I could not do a career where I was sitting at a desk. I just did not like being stationary, and it was boring to me. So I wanted to do a career where I was moving and I was on my feet. And so I was like, I want to help people. I want to be moving. So nursing was my career of choice from that experience in high school.
okay. So graduated from high school. Did you go to college or did what happened next?
I went straight to college. I
Okay.
went to University of South Carolina in upstate, which
Is that
was
the Gamecocks or is that somebody else?
it's Gamecock system. It's
Okay.
one of their connected schools. It's just not in Columbia. It's in Spartanburg, but it's
Oh,
still.
shout out Spartanburg. I got folks in Spartanburg. What up, Spartanburg peeps? Love y'all.
So I went to USC Upstate. It was a 4-year program. I did all 4 years. I finished within the 4 years. I wasn't an extended student. And I ended up settling in Spartanburg. I started working at the local hospital there.
No, wait. So you went? Did you go to like regular college and like major in biology, or you went directly to a nursing college?
I majored. My original program of choice was nursing, so I majored in.
Okay.
I did. The program was through that school, so I did my first 2 years of prerequisites at Spartanburg, USC Upstate in Spartanburg, and then I applied to their nursing program, and the last 2 years was me in their nursing program.
Oh, okay. So you were 22, 23 years old, ready to start nursing.
Yep, ready to start nursing.
Okay.
Now, granted, it did take me a minute to pass my nursing boards because I struggled tremendously with testing anxiety. So I took it a few times. But in the window of me studying for boards, I did work as a CNA, what people know as a nursing assistant. So I kind of got my feet in the door right after after graduating. And then when I finally passed my boards, I just transitioned into being an actual nurse.
Got it. Do you suffer from testing anxiety? Many people do. It doesn't matter if it's an SAT or an ACT or a nursing board exam or even the CFP. We've got a friend of the pod that can help you out. Introducing Test Anxiety No More. It is a book by Dr. Bianca Bush. She's a psychiatrist that specializes in helping individuals in the college and adult learners that suffer from testing anxiety. If you'd like a coupon for a book, see it in the show notes. See what I did there? We did ads. That wasn't that bad. Hopefully you didn't skip past it. But yeah, for those of you that have testing anxiety, reach out to Bianca. She's awesome. Continuing. So it took you a little while to pass the boards because you just got super nervous and you walk in and you're like, I don't remember any of this stuff. And then that was
I would overthink things. When I was trying to study, I just could not focus. So it was, and plus, and during that time that I was trying to become a nurse, I had a nursing job when I graduated. So I had a job that was waiting on me. So that added pressure to that whole situation. Like I was just like, I gotta pass. And then I just was psyching myself out. I couldn't focus. I couldn't really just zone into what I needed to do. So it took me a minute to get there, but I got there.
So how long did it take? What was this waiting time like?
It's about 2 years.
Whoa. Okay. So you had a significant gap. So let's talk about the financial parts of that. It's all in the past. So it was what it is. Can we share with the people a little bit about how you handled your finances while you were waiting to pass this exam?
So I was still living in Spartanburg. I had an apartment. I had a roommate. So we were splitting the bills, but I was still independent, taking care of myself. I think at that time, the offer was for like $20 an hour if I would have gotten the actual nursing job. But instead of the $20 an hour, I was maybe making half that as a nursing assistant. So I didn't come right out of school making top dollar at that time, because this was way back when.
Girl, this is like 8 years ago. You act like you old or something.
Well, no,
we're not. It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to tell the people your real age. It's fine.
And so my student loans was on hold, forbeared, because I couldn't make that payment because I wasn't making the money. And so I was just living with a roommate. I had the normal rent, food, water, shelter, car. I didn't have a car payment because my car at the time was paid off. I still was driving the car that I had in high school. My dad had bought me a car in high school, so I was still driving that car. So it wasn't as if my bills was like exponential. I didn't know enough to have credit card debt at that time. Um,
Oh, blessed you.
yeah, it was a great time back then. I didn't know
So
nothing back then.
let's go back because we kind of I apologize. I brushed over that. Let's go back to the student loan. So you did mention you went to school for 4 years, got it done in 4, didn't take you more. However, it sounds like you had to borrow money to make that happen. So
Mhm.
let's go back to graduating from high school. So how many schools did you apply to go to?
I don't even remember. I only think at that time I only had like 4 schools that I might have
Okay.
wanted to go to. I didn't want to go too far from home. I don't know why. I just was really afraid to go out of state. So I think I got into, I remember just applying to the UC system. So USC Columbia, which is Gamecocks. I did USC Aiken, which I did get in there, but that would have only been like a 20-minute, 30-minute drive from home. So I did want to leave home a little bit because I wanted to at least grow up and actually have a college life. Because if I would have went to USC Aiken, I probably would have stayed at home with my parents, which looking back on it now financially, that probably would have been smart to do.
I mean, it has its pros and cons, but okay. So because you chose to go further away from home, your loans for school had to be enough to cover tuition and room and board.
And the
Versus if you stayed closer,
yeah,
maybe you just would have had to cover tuition.
and had I done that, because I did go to school on the life scholarship, more than
Okay.
likely I would have had way, way less debt because I would not have had to pay room and board because it would have made more financial sense to stay at home with my mom and dad and just commute back and forth versus going to school 2.5 hours away. Room and board, and then add in the fact that after my sophomore year I moved off campus, so I had an apartment and I was living with my sister. Me and my sister was roommates at the time, but the bill, I was still splitting bills, so still living a college student, you know.
So did you ever have any um doubts or concerns or fears when it was time to fill out the FAFSA? I mean, did you read it? Did you understand
I
how those costs were going to add up? Did you,
I
or was it just I gotta sign this so I go to college, and you just kind of just signed away?
That's exactly what it was. I don't even think I thought about it. I think in my mind, all I knew back then was, oh, I will only have to pay these loans back 6 months after graduating. That was my only thought. So, and at that time, because I worked in the financial aid office while I was in school. And so it was easy to Perkins loan, sure, by all
Click,
means.
click, click. Yeah.
Let's sign you up for that because it's gonna be paid back because you're a nurse. That was literally my only thought process in racking up the debt that I took to go to school. I never sat down and thought about the long-term effects of the student loans and like doing things differently so that, because it would have been smarter. And I put this out there for people who are looking into going into this route, for me to go to a community college to do my prereqs versus going to a university. And then I could have just transferred into the university into that nursing program. So it would have been me not having as much debt or having to pay as such of a high bill to go to school when I could have easily went to school for really free for the first 2 years and then just had that portion for nursing school. Had I thought about it back then, if I know now what back then, yeah, I would have done it that way because that's the smartest way to do it.
You hear that, kids? That's the smartest way to do it. Yes, I'm speaking specifically to the individuals that are under the age of 18 and still in high school and thinking about your next step.
Mm-hmm.
I know you want to get away from home. You want to experience the campus life. Maybe you got a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you want to be able to have your alone time with that individual. Just go get a hotel and stay at home.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the community college, knock out those prereqs. Instead of borrowing $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. I'm just saying, it's just an idea. Just food for thought. Okay, so let's get back on track here. So go to college, 4 years, done. Takes 2 years for you to pass your exam. You finally pass the exam and you are officially a registered nurse.
Yep.
What happened next?
So at the time, the unit that I was on, I was a nursing assistant on. They hired me as a nurse, except I went from night shift as a CNA to day shift as an RN. So I'm a brand new nurse. I think at the time my pay might have been $21 an hour. And of course, I'm now in instant work mode. I do my orientation. I think it's like a 2-month orientation with the preceptor, and then I'm out on my own. And so I instantly then turn to grind time. And in nursing world, you make money by the more shifts you work. So, I think you're always contracted for 36 hours if you're a bedside nurse, 36 hours a week. That can easily turn into 60 a week if you're picking up 2 extra shifts a week to make overtime. But looking back on it and knowing what I know now, and now I work in California, so I calculate things a little differently. It wasn't that much money to pick up overtime, especially when you're making $20 an hour, right? And time and a half is only $30 at that point. And so I instantly go into grind mode. I'm working. I stay on that unit for a year and a half, and I get to the point of where I'm like, okay, I feel comfortable in my nursing skills. I want to go to the ICU. So I transferred to the MICU, and then now I go from day shift to night shift. Now, then as in the nursing world, you have to calculate the night shift differential. And I think at that hospital, it might have been like a $5 night shift differential to work night shift. So it wasn't that like an abundance of money. So now I'm working night shift. I'm in the ICU, a medical ICU. I do that for another year and a half. And then I'm like, okay, I want to be an educator. So I go back to the unit that I started on as a clinical unit educator. But even at that time, I was up to making $26 an hour as a unit educator. And so I do that for another 2 years. And so I get to the point of where I'm like, all right, I feel good. I want to make more money. So now I'll become a travel nurse. And at that time, our hospital has started utilizing travel nurses, and they started telling me about all the money, all the perks, which you can do, with travel nursing. And I'm like, all right, I'm single. I had a house at that time and all of that. So I'm like, I want to go travel. It's just me. I've been here, like, let's go. And so I take off to Texas. Texas is my first contract that I took.
Welcome home.
Which was really interesting because I was on the border of Texas. I didn't speak a lick of Spanish. Everyone there spoke Spanish. I stayed there for 10 weeks, and it was by far the hardest thing I think I've ever done. But my nursing skills were solid, so I can hold my own. I just couldn't speak their language, but I could hold my own. And once again, I fall into that trap of I'm here to grind, I'm going to work. So even though I'm contracted for 36 hours, I'm still working 6 and 7 day work weeks. And I think at that time that contract, I might have been making like $50 an hour.
Oh, that's a significant increase. Okay.
And so it goes up, but at the same time, I'm still not bringing in a significant amount of money when you really look at it, because I had to duplicate expenses. So I have to still pay for my house that I have back home. And I also have to pay for what I'm living in here because I'm in Texas now. So I'm living in like an extended stay. It was a really nice extended stay, but it was still duplicating expenses because
so they weren't covering your lodging expense.
They're not covering my lodging. They're giving me the money for me to cover my lodging expenses. So I stay in Texas 10 weeks, and then I go from Texas to Arizona. I stayed in Arizona for 9 months. I loved Arizona because it was hot. I actually liked the hospital that I was at. And I think the pay was still about the same. And I pulled back on some of my hours because now I'm in a place where I actually like being as hot. I want to go and see stuff. So, I'm exploring. And then I go back home. I stay there for 9 months and I go back to South Carolina. So now I'm home. And so now I took a contract that was about an hour and a half from my actual house. And so, and it was, the hospital was in between my house and my mom's house. So on days that I would work, because it would only take me an hour to get to my mom's house, I would just drive from Columbia to Williston. And then on the days where I wasn't working, I would just go back to my house. So that was really convenient because now I'm able to save more money. I'm at home. My mom is able to see me. I'm not gone. Like, I'm living great at this point. Like, still don't have a lot of credit card debt. I'm living great.
How those student loans doing at that point?
See, that's the thing. I was not smart to start paying back the student loans.
You just kept defer. Like, yeah, I got the money for y'all. Defer, defer. You call them up and say, hey, they're like, let's guess. You want to defer? Yep. You know, how'd you know? Go ahead and defer that. So that means the interest was still adding up.
Yep.
Do you remember how much you originally had when you left college?
I don't. And it couldn't have been no more than 40, 50 grand of student loan debt.
Wow. Do you know how much it ended up being when you started actually paying on it?
When I actually started paying on it.
Mm-hmm. Like, how much had that 40 grown to?
I'm not even sure because I don't even remember. I remember paying, like starting to pay, but I don't think I looked at specific numbers. I just remember, I think I got to a point where I'm like, all right, I need to start paying closer, because I had a point where in my life where I wasn't really paying attention to money. I was just living. And then it was like a light bulb went off that was like, all right, you need to do a little better with this because you really, like, you got some serious debt that you need to pay attention to that you're not paying attention to. You know what? When I did start paying attention to the debt, because I also, during the time of all of this, I went back and got an MBA. Because,
so you were like, hey, bring the debt on. Let's go.
I did.
Let's get some more.
Because I did hit a point in that 2 years that I was working to get my nursing license, because I was working with some nurses that wasn't too friendly. And I hit that point where I'm like, I'm not going to do nursing anymore. I'm just going to go back and I'm going to get a business degree and just find something in human resources. I'm not going to do this anymore because.
So you almost had a career change.
I almost had a career change because during that time as a CNA, I was a nurse as a CNA, and I struggled tremendously with that. And the nurses that I was working with, some of them wasn't as friendly as I would have hoped. I remember one of them in particular. She just was not kind, and like I would be stuck with her all the time. And so I got to the point where I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna do something different. So I went back to school. I got that MBA, and that added on to the debt that I already have. And so when I got my house, I almost couldn't get my house because of the amount of student loan debt that I had. And I think at that point, I might have been at like 100K in student loan debt.
Wow.
Yeah, I was almost at that point to where my debt to income ratio was too high. But
all right.
Let's
pause on that. That's a very important concept that you have to understand about not only student loan debt, but car debt, credit card debt, etc. In the medical community, you get paid well. You do, compared to some of the other jobs out there. You went to school for a long time. You're educated, and let's just face it, you're saving lives, most of you, or at least dramatically enhancing them. Plastic surgeons, well, elective plastic surgeons. Actually, you could be saving a life too if you're elective, but you get my drift. You've worked hard for a long time. You studied. Now you're making good money and you want to enjoy some of the fruits of your labor. But if you got it all on credit, whether it's the credit cards or it's the student loans, when you go to purchase a home or do something else that requires them to look at your credit score, that's just one component. The other component that they look at is your debt to income ratio. So they want to know how much of your money that you're earning has to be used to service the debt that you have. And all lenders have minimums and maximums that they'll allow in those categories. And that could stop you from being able to get a loan for a home because you have too much debt in other places. And sometimes it doesn't even matter what the payment actually is. They'll use their own formula.
In my travel endeavors, after coming back home, I stayed in South Carolina for a few weeks. That contract, I think, was like 13 weeks. And then I decided I am going to California. And so I took off across the country. I started out in the Bay Area. So I started out at Kaiser in Santa Rosa, did a contract there. And I was like, oh, this is great because, and I forget how much that contract was paying at that time, but it's like going from making $50 an hour to $80. It had to be around there.
Oh, so
Um,
significant.
so yeah, it was pretty significant. So now I'm because at that point that I decided to go to California, I had heard so many people talk about, oh, you should go nursing in California. They get paid so much more than we do. And I took that and ran with it, not thinking, well, the cost of living there is significantly higher. Like, there's a reason they get paid that much.
That part.
And so I went from the Bay Area, then I took a contract down in Southern California. I stayed in Southern California for a little while. Then I came back to the Bay Area and did another Kaiser contract at Fremont. And I was just like, man, this is great. They do get paid great out here. And at that time I had a roommate. I had found somebody along the way, a roommate that we would split in the bills. And so I was like, oh, this is wonderful. And so at that time I was like, I want to stay in the Bay Area. Like I want to stay here and be a nurse here. So I just started applying to the hospitals in that area, and I ended up getting a permanent position at a Bay Area hospital. I don't know if I should name the hospital, but I got
okay. You don't have to.
So I ended up getting a permanent position, and I think at that time that I started, my starting pay was $83 an hour. I do remember that. And I was working night shift, and so this is where things changed for me. The night shift differential was by percentage. So it's a percentage of your hourly base. And it's a unionized hospital. So things are done differently. And so at that time, I think the percentage was like 16%. So the night shift differential was like 16% of my base. And so I was like, okay, great. And so I went back into grind mode where I'm now
back to grind mode.
5 and 6 days, nights in a week. And so that started me back on this night shift journey. And I was just, oh my God. And so I then got incorporated in this hospital. So I stayed on this unit for about 6 months. And then I was just like, man, I really want to do ICU. I really want to try to do CBICU. And at this hospital, and in order to get into ICU, you have to go through a training program. And so I did a critical care training program to get into the CBICU at this hospital. And so I started doing CBICU, and I stayed on night shift. And so our union contracts went into play, and then the night shift differential went up to 18% of our base. And then now I'm getting raises. Raises is a normal part of my routine. And so my hourly rate is just climbing, and there's different incentives in the hospital. You're getting an education bonus. You're getting another bonus for your CE to do your CEUs. And so I'm looking at all of the perks, and I'm watching my pay rate just climb. And so I ended up staying in the CBICU for almost 6 years. And in that 6 years is when we go through COVID. And so COVID is pretty significant in my journey because
ICU, yeah, of course it is.
Man, I was
at
the hospital all the time. It was like I lived there because there was always a need. We was always short. There was always such high turnover in the CBICU because when COVID hit, we had that little grace period when they didn't really know what COVID was, and the world went on standstill. Well, things didn't stay on standstill for nurses. When it picked up, it picked up. And seeing all of these patients come in, I was ECMO trained. I was all the things trained. So I had all the devices under my belt: ECMO, CRT, balloon pump, Impella. So all of those patients I could care for. So for the unit that I was working on, when there was a need, it was nothing for me to say, yeah, I'll work an extra shift. You need me to come in 4 hours early. You need me to stay 4 hours later. And in California, when you work past 12 hours, that's double time. And so you can make 4 hours, which you can make in 8 hours. And so you kind of get, as a nurse, you get hip to being, strategic with your work shifts. Oh, I'm going to stay an extra 4 here. Go ahead and get that double time. And so I watched my pay rate increase, the amount of money that I'm making. I watched all of that increase. And it was just wonderful. So I'm still here in California. I'm still working at the same hospital, although I'm not in the same department. I'm in a different department now. Now I'm in a cath lab, which is a whole other beast of itself. I'm still new in the cath lab, so I haven't gotten to the point of where the call pay kicks in. And here, call pay, you get paid half your base just to sit on call, and then it's time and a half when you come back in. And then there's some moments where if you get side letter pay, that's a whole other, it's like making double time on double time. So that's it now.
So what I've learned about your journey is, number one, you were very clear on what you wanted to do.
Yes.
So you were clear on what you wanted to do. You went through school, you got that done. You did get some test anxiety that gave you a couple of years of setback. However, you're finally able to get over that. And then once you had your credentials, it was work grind mode.
Yep.
It took some years for you to really start paying attention to your finances. And as you did, you also said, you know what, maybe I should get some more education so that I can make some more money.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it was your nursing career that really kicked off because you learned about travel nursing. You got to get outside of your home state and experience some things. And again, get to focus on the things that you love. And one of the things you learned throughout that process is the importance of understanding the compensation plan of the company you're working for. Because once you understood that compensation plan as a nurse, you had the keys in your pocket. Unlock. Let's go. I got, okay, double time this, triple time this. I get this, I get this, I get this. And you were able to decide how much are you willing to do? How hard are you willing to work? So through that, I'd like to just know if there was any, and you mentioned a few different things, but what would you say was your greatest financial mistake that you made across that journey?
Not paying attention to it early on. I think had I paid attention to and took it seriously early on, I think in my mind, it was out of sight, out of mind in the beginning. I didn't pay attention to it. It wasn't even a thought. Girl, you got student loans you need to pay off. Like, I was just living just to live. And then I put myself in a position to where I was taking care of external people, external things, instead of taking care of the things that was attached to me, which is my student loans. And instead of paying attention to that, I was putting my money elsewhere. And, you know, looking back on it now, like I put a lot of money in external things when I could have been done paying off these student loans by now. Had I?
Oh, so you're still working on student loans?
Still working on the student loans.
Okay. All right.
Well. It is going to be a journey. And even though I've been a nurse for 10 plus years, student loan forgiveness hadn't completely kicked in yet. Still fighting. I've gotten the hospital that I'm at. Like you said, I've made it work for me. That $1,800 education fee we get, it goes towards my student loans. The hospital pays them directly for me. So every year they'll give me $1,800 towards my student loans, and please, by all means, the student loan company can have it. You know, so it's not paying attention to it early on, not taking it seriously, and not thinking wise enough to reach out to a professional to help me financially. Because it was early on that money was not my thing to manage. Like, it was not something I learned growing up. It was not something my parents taught to me about. It was not something I ever saw happen within the community that I grew up in. So I knew nothing. The only person in my life that was like early on was like, hey girl, you need to pay, my best friend. And she's an accountant. And she was like, no girl, like you really should be paying attention to them student loans. Like you over here playing, but them student loans still growing. Like
still there, still here, never left.
And so she was the only person that I can think that was like, no, you got more serious financial obligations, because you get into that mindset of, oh, I ain't got nothing to worry about. Oh, you know, and she was like, you don't, you ain't got the student loans to worry about, like for real. And so not paying attention to it early on and not taking it seriously early on and just letting it just sit there. Like I could have been making, even if it was smaller payments, I could have still been paying stuff down and like making payments towards it, because, you know, with COVID and them recounting the payment and how that was structured, I could have benefited from that, like truly benefited from that, had I done things differently early on. And just my finances, I think I would be a little like better off had I paid attention to things better back then, because I'm in a great position now. I make great money now And I know better now to be a little bit more disciplined, to be a little bit more structured. But early on, I was out here playing games, just little
Having fun,
sleep.
grinding, hustling, spending.
Yeah, exactly. That was it.
Yep, that's the
Yeah.
move. Got it. So, we mentioned at the top of the show, we actually introduced you as the founder of Swallow the Pill. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about this Swallow the Pill. What is it? And how'd you come up with it? What is it? Let's start there.
All right. So Swallow the Pill is a health education and advocacy education business that I am trying to develop. And what it is, this came to me years ago. I am a nurse educator at heart. It's always something that I've enjoyed doing. It's always something that I've kind of had a few toes within. And so I've always tried to find different avenues of nursing education to fit within, and then to kind of bring out to the community that I'm within. And so I also have a MSN, which I actually paid for that degree out of pocket. So my MSN is in nursing education. The focus was nursing education. And so by getting that degree, it has grounded my foundation for nursing education. Like, I'm not just coming off of a whim trying to educate. I was actually taught how to educate. And with this company, so what I've seen within the nursing world, within my community, just in general, just from listening to people talk, they go to the doctor sometimes they don't go to the doctor. And then sometimes they know what the doctor is talking about. A lot of times they don't. Just being within the cath lab itself, oftentimes, we get patients in, we're putting them on the table, and their question is, when am I going to talk to anesthesia? Or when are they going to put me to sleep? And by that time that you see me, at this point, I'm a nurse. Those questions should have been answered, and you should have understood already that there is no anesthesia in some of the cases that I'm in. And so by the time we get to the table, if you're asking that question.
Cath lab as in catheter?
Catheter.
There's no anesthesia for a catheter?
A heart cath. So some procedures, no. Some procedures you can be awake and it's perfectly fine. You do not have pain receptors in your heart. So sometimes you don't feel
I'm thinking about a different catheter. Okay, never mind.
See, and that's the thing. Like, sometimes some people don't even understand if you're
See, I didn't understand. You said catheter, I immediately went to urine catheters, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't. You can't numb it up a little bit.
Awake. Even for a urine catheter, you're awake for that. That's
you can't put some Novocaine on it or something. You can't just.
But you don't need
lidocaine. That's what lidocaine. That's the right one, right?
Yeah, but you don't need an anesthesiologist for that.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You don't. Okay, fair enough.
But and it's stuff like
put me to sleep for this catheter.
And we get that from patients all the time. And it's like, I'm watching them come in and they're asking these questions after having signed a consent, after having said that they understood. If you're asking me that tells me you're not understanding what's happening. And you're making decisions about your health that you're not completely clear on. So that opens the door for a number of things to happen. And my goal is to work with patients, work with communities, work with individuals to help them to understand their health, help them to understand what the doctor is actually saying to them. They told you have hyperlipidemia. What exactly does that mean? Do you understand what they're saying when they tell you that? Do you understand what changes you should be making in order to reverse that or in order to address that about your life? I've watched my mom going to doctor's appointments, and I know she don't understand what these people are talking to her about. And they're not expanding on anything. I remember sitting with her. She was having a colonoscopy done, and she went to the scheduler to make the appointment. And at that appointment, this girl tells her, yes, you can do the prep with drinking a gallon of sweet tea. My mom is a pre-diabetic. She's not about you, and you just told her to drink this prep that is a gallon with sweet tea. Absolutely not. No, ma'am. Like, and to hear stuff like that happens all the time, and patients don't know any better. They don't have enough information to ask the right questions, I feel like. And so I want to work to bridge the gap between the doctor's office and the home, the doctor's office and the community. They're telling you these things, but do you completely understand what it means when they say that? Do you understand what lab work you need to have, John? Do you understand that you even need to have a yearly physical? Do you even know that your insurance company should cover that yearly physical? It's preventative medicine. So my company Swallow the Pill, and Swallow the Pill is a play off words. When I was a med-surg tele nurse, I used to say that all the time. Did you swallow the pill? When I'm assessing if a patient has swallowed what I've given them. So it's a play off word. Have you swallowed? Have you digested what they've told you about your health? Do you understand what
Okay.
they're saying about your health? And so that's my ultimate goal, is for people to have the knowledge that they need to make better health decisions about their health, to make sure that they are knowing what options they have before them. I see all the time at the hospital that I work at, people come in because these doctors have talked them into these procedures. And some of these procedures they do not need to have. And I say that lightly. But because they feel like this is the end all be all, they need to have these procedures. Some of these procedures are not necessary. You can live a life that's perfectly fine without having this done. You're actually putting yourself at higher risk by laying on these people's table and letting them do what they do, because then you open yourself up to their knowledge and expertise. And sometimes there are some cowboys in the healthcare world.
No, and there's just a recovery risk
in the recovery. So yeah, there's tons of risks that you open.
Deion Sanders lost half his foot because he had a surgery, which he probably needed to have, but it was the result of surgery that led to blood clots that led to losing half his foot.
Yes. And that happens all the time.
Did he have to have the surgery? I don't know. Not my business, from him and his doctor, but it was the result of the surgery that led to the blood clot.
Yeah. So it's, and just talking to patients. I remember talking to one of the doctors that I work with in the critical care unit, because I was running this idea of this like by her. I was like, just tell me what you think about this. And she was like, oh, absolutely, there's a need for it, because, at the hospital I work at, we do a lot of transplants, heart, lung transplants. That's common. We see it all the time here. And she was saying some of the patients that she's encountered didn't even realize that their chest would be open. They just thought it was like a small incision for a lung transplant. You know how?
We gotta crack them ribs, bro.
Yeah, like
turn the saw on. Vroom, vroom. Let's get it.
Consent for a procedure, and you don't even know that they have to open your chest. And the recovery period for that alone is massive. So I want to work with patients. Bring me your medical chart. Let's go through it. Do you understand this diagnosis? Let's walk through what they mean when they say that. Do you understand what lab work? Because if you're on certain medicines, that might come with consistent lab work that you have to have drawn. The medicines that you're on. Do you understand what these medicines are doing, like how they're affecting your body? So I really just want to bridge that gap, because I understand it from a medical world. Like, I get some of the stuff, the medical jargon, but when they're giving that to patients, I like people like my mom, had I not been sitting there, she would have drunk that colonoscopy.
Doctor said I had to drink it with tea.
And she would have told me, they told me I can do this. And absolutely not, ma'am. Your hemoglobin A1C have not been below 6 in years. So you're not about to sit here and drink a gallon of tea on my watch. And so that's just what I want to do with whoever needs that assistance.
That is beautiful. Well, anyone that wants to learn more about Swallow the Pill, how can they get in touch with you?
YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where so far I've gone through diabetes, hyperlipidemia, just different things that you wouldn't know if you were being admitted to the hospital. Go to my YouTube channel, Swallow the Pill, Health, Education, and Advocacy. You should see my face pop up, and there's a list of videos that you can go through. I'm also on TikTok at Swallow the Pill. I'm also on Instagram at Swallow the Pill. So there's a few avenues that they can get to me through.
And we will put some of the links in our show notes. Zena, thank you so much for opening your heart and your mind and your soul and just sharing it with all of our listeners. Hopefully, as a listener, especially if you're someone that's on that path, you picked up some valuable nuggets. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, to Zena, like I said, you don't have to learn everything through experience. So if you're that person that hasn't been paying attention to your finances, start by paying attention. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to change anything, but start by just gathering some awareness. And as you gather that awareness, that should lead you to ask more questions. And if you get to a point where you're like, I don't know the answer to this, ask for help. Whether it's myself, whether it's another financial advisor, there's dozens of financial advisors that actually specialize in the medical field. You can find some of us on all the different social medias. Make sure you're talking to someone reputable and not someone that's just going to sell you some product and say, oh, the answer is you got to buy this from me. No, you're looking for strategies. You're looking for consultation. You're not looking for a product. So again, Zena, thank you for joining us on the Money Script Podcast. Do yourself a favor, listeners, not yourself. Do someone else a favor. Do someone else a favor. Share this episode with one person. We'll see you next time. Take care.
That's it for today's episode of Becoming an Attendant. Did you pick up something valuable to carry into your next step? I hope so. Remember, the journey is a marathon, not a sprint. So take one step at a time and give yourself grace along the way. Also, this isn't intended to be specific tax or legal advice. Please talk to an attorney or CPA before taking any action. Before you go, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, click the bell for notifications. Share this episode with one of your colleagues who is also on the path to becoming an ER physician. Share this episode with one of your colleagues who is also on the path to becoming an attending ER physician. The show notes also contain more.